For those who haven't seen the previous videos, last year I started building a boat with some cut off lumber and old drilling pipe I found for cheap, based off a sketch my good friend Greg drew. To save cash, I cut up some pipes to make angle iron, and instead of creating a 300 square foot flat work surface, I built the boat standing on one side. My crane truck, Little Red, made it easy moving the steel members of the hull, and my bucket truck, Big Red, did the trick for welding 10 feet off the ground. With one side of the boat welded solid, it was easy to lay it down and level the other side with tractor jack and wood. With the hole welded completely on the inside, Greg and a neighbor flipped the boat over so I could finish welding the outside. The hull being welded solid, it was time for sandblasting paint. The sandblaster I got for free ended up having a hole in it and a pitted bottom on the inside. We found a local sandblaster who could prep the boat, we just needed to get it to them. So now was a good time to flip the boat and put the hydraulic cylinders on. Greg wasn't available this time, so I decided to flip it on my own to keep the project moving. I got the boat up on one end with no problem. Laying it down was a different story. I figured the skid catching while the crane let cable out would be fine, until my truck's outrigger bent. I stood this log up to brace the boat so I could get the truck moved to the other side for a vertical pull, thinking I could also operate the crane from the skid steer's cab. Cranked the skid, gently moved the controls, and the forks unloaded on me. It was gonna be a long night. I re-braced the boat and moved the Mini-X and bucket truck into the mix. Also added a 12,000 pound winch anchored to a tree, slowly releasing tension on each until she was on the ground. Next day I used the winch to slide the boat for a straight out shot on the trailer.
These are the hydraulic cylinders that are going to raise the boat up and down to get it on and off the trailer. It's got a 4-inch bore, 3.5-inch rod, 4-foot long stroke. So I welded on this 1.5-inch solid bar, and that's what these cylinders are going to slide onto. So I'm going to weld this pipe to the cylinder. I made this 3D printed spacer with 100% infill. That'll just protect the paint on this rod. And then I think I'll put this bracket up here, 1-inch stainless bolt with the nut welded into the steel. And yeah, I'll get this welded up, and we'll get the boat off to sandblast and paint. I got the crane pulling vertical on the cylinder. That way this tube is tight up against the bottom side of this. Now I can mark and drill the hole for that bolt, weld that nut in. All right, let's see if the pump kicks on. So I've got the 2 drain valves open so we can get some air out and see what kind of flow we can get out of this thing. Oh, fuck. Probably help if the valves are open. Shut off these drain valves and see if it'll lift. might take a while.
The pump on my cart is actually the car power steering pump that Doug tried on SB Seeker. I'm running it off a generator with an AC to DC converter, so I don't have to rely on battery power. These rams will lift the boat over 3 feet off the ground. Good for getting a trailer under it and mounting wheels to the boat.
The rate that it was going up, I bet you could do all four at the same time.
Yeah. I don't even want to think about how to plumb that. I spent enough on this.
About this time, the local sandblasting shop got back to me with an unreasonable price. They calculated it based off man hours, and we saw their machine operate in person. It was less than 1/4 the speed of what Chris's setup could do. So we'll blast it ourselves. Since we'd be doing the blasting, the boat needed to go over once more, and the last time was sketchy doing it by myself. We needed to get Greg's excavator back online, but fixing it would take away time from building the boat, and there was only 60 days until fall classes started again. The solution? I helped fix some of Greg's stuff. In return, he helps me finish the boat.
But while we're waiting on seals and parts for that, next we're gonna work on this thing because it's been overheating. It's definitely got water in the oil. Funny looking oil you got there.
Mm-hmm. It's brand new.
Yeah. And this one needs a new clutch and alternator. We've got the transmission out of this truck. The clutch is gone. Flywheel's got cracks in it. So we're waiting on a new flywheel and clutch. We got a new starter as well. We'll get that back together soon. We knew it was possible that porta power on the track tensioner is what destroyed the final drive. Since we got it apart, that's actually not what happened. Excavators have this brake clutch pack here with these friction discs. And the way it works is this piece of steel right here is a spring that actively engages that clutch pack until fluid is pushed through this hole, which comes out that hole. And this piece right here has 2 O-rings in it, sliding in here. So when fluid's pushed in, those 2 O-rings keep the fluid in there, and this pushes back this direction, releasing the spring tension of this plate. When there's no fluid present, the spring tension pushes that back in, locking up the brake pads. So what happened is, Greg noticed that the right track was dragging a little slower than the left track the whole time, and then eventually the stick got tighter and tighter until the seal blew and all the fluid came out. So what he was feeling, that O-ring, we don't know how long it had been bad, it was leaking fluid into the case. So when that O-ring went, instead of fluid releasing the brakes, it filled up this final drive housing. The stick kept getting tighter and tighter because the fluid had nowhere to go, until eventually the seals that keep these 2 cases together blew, and that's when all the fluid came out. So while we're waiting on new seals and O-rings, we've got this station here to keep everything organized, and one at a time we'll be bringing pieces out and cleaning them on that table out there. New parts come in, we'll put everything back together, sandblast the barge.
Having the big excavator running again makes flipping the barge a lot easier. And it was nice to know that the porta power we used in place of a track tensioner spring isn't what blew out the final drive's face seals. The next day we rented a 400 CFM compressor and a blast pot. We used our own large diameter blast hose and a lightweight and flexible whip with a number 7 extra long Venturi tungsten carbide nozzle. These are tips we learned from Chris on our trip to St. Augustine. The harder we can make the sand hit, the less time and material we'll need to finish the job. With the tips he taught us, maintaining high pressure with big CFM, a good hose end, and long nozzle, we got the boat blasted for 1/3 of the price we were quoted. We also returned the compressor and pot in less than 24 hours, with only 4 hours of actual hose time. That includes the inside of the barge too. After blasting, we gave the boat 4 coats of Seaguard 5000 epoxy and another 3 coats of Seaguard copper bottom antifouling. Time came to choose the color, and when you already have 3 trucks that are all the same color, there's only one option. And this is when Greg came up with the boat's name, Rockn Red. It was time to build the cabin. My plan was to laminate the boards I already had for the upright posts, but Greg talked me into milling them with a sawmill from logs on the property. After seeing them milled, I realized they were absolutely worth the time and effort, much better than my original plan. During the home stretch, we didn't have much time to film. For perspective on how tight the timeline was, painting started on July 12th. We splashed the boat on the 12th of August, and I was in class by the 18th. Having wheels that bolt on means I'll be able to pull the boat out at any ramp in the future. And since the axles have a square tubing post, I can lift the boat with the rams and rotate the wheels 90 degrees for turning. While we were at the launch for a few hours, there was still enough room for others to use the ramp too. The next morning, we pulled the wheels up with the spud winch and took the boat for a spin.
Andy's like a kid in the toy store.
God damn it, Greg. You had one job.
Leaving the dock, headed down the river.
The only thing left to do was to take a 65-mile epic trip to the river behind campus.